My name is Davin Sturdivant, and in this Aim Learn Fast video, we will learn how to understand GSum values in Race Studio. So I race competition cards, and I'm also a writer for Kart Pulse, which is designed to gather information about the sport of karting and put it into an easy to find place. So when I got in touch with Roger Cadell, who's the national trainer for Aim Sport, we decided to put together some videos about how to use karting data in Race Studio. We've broken them up into these little mini vignettes, hopefully to make it easy to consume. But if you have questions about whatever we cover, just leave a comment below and we'll put it in another video. So I'm going to turn it over to Roger and take it from there. So, Roger, when I'm looking at my data, I'm trying to find a way that I can verify that I'm getting the maximum amount of my cart more consistently every lap. Is there a way that I can do that?
There is, and I get that question a lot, right? You got people that maybe don't share data, maybe they do share data, but when they look at their data first, there is okay, am I getting to the max, of what this thing will give me? Am I sustainably doing that? Am I, is it falling off at the end of the race, right? Is it chassis? Those are some of the why things. Is it chassis? Is it tires? Is it me? But let's look at a couple of ways that we can just look at data and that comes out of your Micron 4, Micron 5 with the GPS especially. That's kind of what we're going to look at now. And look at our lateral acceleration and our longitudinal acceleration. And then we'll talk about a math channel we can put together to look at the sum of these two acceleration values, something we call the GSum channel. So what I've got on the screen here is I always like to have a speed trace up. It just puts me, I know where I'm at on the track and I can see when I'm accelerating, things like that. So I always have a speed trace up. And then these next two that I've got up are the GPS based. They're very, 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 very powerful and strong, but they're the GPS based lateral acceleration is the blue one. And the lateral acceleration, if you think of it, in line with the cart, it's the g-forces that the cart, you as a driver, is feeling left and right of the center line of the cart, perpendicular to the cart, center line. So if basically if you are, if the number is negative, as is right here on the data that we're looking at, the cart is turning left. So negative values are left-hand corners, and positive values. Now here I'm up at the top of this peak of the lateral G trace is a right-hand corner. So negatives are lefts, positive are rights. That's how you can kind of tell where you're at, the type of corner you're in on these left and right, these humps and valleys here we're looking at in the lateral G trace. So that's the lateral one. What we're not displaying there at all is what the cart is doing in the center line of the cart. In other words, acceleration or braking. So we've got another channel that's just dedicated to that, and that's longitudinal acceleration. So we can take the longitudinal acceleration values, and we can look at those here in this trace. In this case, I've got it colorized black. But if it's above 0, you're accelerating. Your back is being pushed into the seat, right? And when you're on the brakes, those are always negative numbers. So here, where this line dips down, and right here it's peaking at about negative 0.35 Gs. That is braking. You're being shoved towards the steering wheel. All good, but the trouble is those two values are only in those two axes of the car, right? You're either left and right or you're fore and aft, right? Acceleration or deceleration. So what we've done, and to step back, from going from an acceleration down the straightaway and then braking for a corner, we can see that, and then we can see the turning. But what the good drivers are doing, and the way that you get the most out of the cart, is being on the performance envelope of, at the performance envelope of the cart at all times. The driver, the cart, the tires, the combination of all of that. And what we want to do then is look at when you are hitting the brakes and then you transition into turning. And when you transition into turning, how smooth was that? How did you abuse the tires when you did that movement from brakes to turning? And was it, did you stay on that performance envelope of the cart as you transition from braking to turning? So we have a way of doing that with a math channel. It's actually in the AIM Sports, the Race Studio 2 default math channel values. I do not have those in the math channels I'm going to show you here, but I'm going to show you, I've renamed it to GSum. Let me open up the math channel box. Math channel is this icon up here that looks like a math formula. Let's open that thing up. And I've got the math channel, I've called it GSum. You can grab it off of the screen as to build it yourself, for those of you watching the video. But it's what we basically do is take that same lateral acceleration we've been talking about and that longitudinal acceleration down here in the math channel, and we add the two of them, we square them, and then we take the square root of that value. And if somebody needs it, they can email me, Roger@aimsports.com. I'll send you the math channel. I'll send you a set you can import with it built in already, or you can build it exactly like it showed here. But when we do that, and we take this lateral G's and this longitudinal G's, and we run them through this process. I'm going to cancel out of this since I already have it built, and then it's up here in our list. And here's the GSum that we just built. And then we end up with this red trace. And if you look at this, it's always a positive number, just by the way the math works out. But when the driver starts to brake right here, right, the driver's already turning a little bit. So we've already got some, we've summed these two together, and we've got some in the GSum value. And if we turn left, turn right, whatever it happens to be, you end up with, the GSum, a total of these two values in both directions, and we can now see whether or not the driver is staying out at that performance envelope, or the friction circle, for lack of a better word, as well. So let's take a look at a specific corner here, and let's break it down to make it even more clear. These typically work the best when you have a straightaway, a braking zone, and then turn through a corner, and then an acceleration zone after. That's the best way to look at them when you first look at them, start working with them. And this corner down here, on the back straightaway, you're coming down. There's a little, there's a bit of a turn to it, but it's you're basically going straight. And as you can see here, I'm going to zoom in on this corner just a little bit, and move this over to the middle. And I'm going to zoom in on the GPS map just to make it a little even clearer yet. So right back here, you can see the speed trace goes up and starts down. You can see that there's acceleration here on the longitudinal G, and it's a positive number right here, 0.9 Gs, right? It's positive, so the driver's being pushed into the seat. His back is being pushed into the seat. That means the cart is still accelerating. Then you see what happens here. You see this goes down to 0, and it runs along it here at 0 for a little bit. There's two things that could have happened here. Number one, the driver could be coasting, just had lifted off the throttle a little bit at the end of the back straightaway, and me and him would have to have a talk, right? You're not going to coast on your cart. That's not the right thing to do. But more, I think, in this particular case, and we could bring up the engine RPM and take a look at it, but in this case, I believe he's on the rev limiter here at the end of the back straightaway, would be my guess. So the cart no longer is accelerating. But let's look beyond that, and where he actually starts to hit the brakes is right here. See the black line here where it starts to dip down? That means the driver has got off the throttle, jumped onto the brake pedal, and is starting to build up his deceleration. You can see here that he didn't start to really turn the steering wheel until about halfway through the first part of the braking. Okay, so we've got this GSum, the combination of these two, the blue and the black together, is the red, and you can see that this is a nice transition from braking and starting to turn, and the driver in a nice smooth way, because it's a nice crisp up, slant of the line, is doing a great job all the way till about here. And at that point, what has changed, right? The driver continued to turn the steering wheel. The lateral G's are building. He had gotten to his maximum braking and is starting to release, but since he was still raising turning the steering wheel more and getting even more lateral G's, it was a nice smooth line. He was taking advantage of the full friction capability of the tires and is not shocking the cart and making it want to lose grip. And then all of a sudden, see, the red line starts to flatten out. He's still building G's, but it's not at the full capability of the cart. And now, and you always have to ask yourself why. We've talked about that a lot on these videos. Is, okay, I see that, but why, right? So if I put the cursor right there where it starts to transition into being a little bit flatter, look at what he's done. He's releasing the brakes, and he continues to release the brakes just a touch. I mean, he's still slowing down, but not as much. And he's also stopped turning in. The driver, as he gets down there into that spot of where you're really turning in and really got a lot of force on the tires, ends up at 1.26 laterals, still negative at 0.38, and a total of 1.31. It's pretty, that's a high grip level, right? So he's leaving a little on the table, it looks to me, as he comes up towards the maximum that he used in this corner, which was 1.84. And you can see that he goes up and then he loses some right here.
Mm.
And he loses it because he's staying the same with his steering. The laterals are holding steady, and yet he's went flat on the braking. When
Mm.
everything is kind of releasing here a little bit, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden he gets after the brakes a little harder, and he turns a little bit more. His GSum goes up. Now that's shocking. Yeah, and I use that term not in an electrical sense, but in a in a sense that it affects the grip level of the cart. Yeah, all of a sudden he's asking for more grip, and if the cart's
Right.
clean, getting close to the limit, that will start the understeer or that will start the oversteer. So the smoother the driver can be on applying the brakes,
Mm.
leaving the right amount of brake, and turning in all as one joint fluid motion, the better the cart will be in the middle of the corner, and the more speed that the cart will have, and the more consistent speed the cart will have all the way through. If we finish this up just a little bit farther, he goes down here, he releases like we looked at a second ago, and then all of a sudden it starts to come back up because he threw a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more steering wheel at it as he's really getting close down here to the apex, right? As you can see on the GPS map as well. And then you drop the brakes off totally. Actually got on the throttle for a little bit, right?
Mm.
Right at this point, he's releasing the wheel and drop that off, and a huge decrease in the
Mm.
GSum.
So basically, we could say that the driver is shocking the cart mid-corner if we're gonna keep it simple. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
All of a sudden, the driver has done something to the cart, and the cart wasn't in a nice, smooth, loaded state. All of a sudden, he released it and then tried to load it again hard, shocking the tires,
Mm-hmm.
right? The grip level, and then and he probably will at that point will wonder, well, earlier, why did it get free on me? Why did it get loosened up all of a sudden?
Mm-hmm.
And then here at the end, where he loses a bunch of grip overall because he's released the brakes and released the steering wheel, this is where a good driver is going to be still loaded up and still at the maximum
Right.
grip that the cart has, and it'll be a nice big hump that comes up and then comes right back down,
Mm-hmm.
and that is area is equals to speed,
Right. That
right?
makes
it's
sense.
it's exit speed is what
Yeah.
that hump, losing this and going back up and then starting to come down in a nice way, by the way, that the rest of this looks very good.
Mm-hmm.
But so he starts his corners well and he's ending his corners well, but he's leaving a lot on the table up here in the middle.
In the middle.
Even if the cart is only capable of doing this 1.8 that he's got here, this should have went up to 1.8 in a perfect world. It's never a
Mm-hmm.
perfect world out on the cart track, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it should have went up to what the goal is to go up to that 1.8, drift along straight across at 1.8, and then release the wheel, and you would have the most entry, mid corner, and exit speed on the way out.
Right, and I think that's an interesting point to bring up of the performance potential when you
Mm-hmm.
look at GSum, because that dip mid
Yeah.
corner where it dips down and comes back up is a clear example of where we've left something on the table.
Absolutely. And in a cart, because of the way the carts work, when you take something off the table, to use your great phrase, when you drop it off, then the inside tire sometimes drops down because the cart's not loaded up anymore, and all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you have contact across the rear axle, and then you try to load it up again, and that's where an understeer will happen because all of a sudden that inside tire was released a little bit because the driver did something to release it, and then boom, all of a sudden the understeer happens. Then bad things happen all the way out, right? So that is your goal as a driver sitting in the seat. Yes, there's when do you get on the throttle, when do you get on the brakes, and all that. But if you're thinking just the friction circle and the performance envelope of the cart, and your hands doing things to keep you getting the most out of the cart, this really needs to come up. And every time you're doing it, there should be a nice smooth transition to full G's, to full G sum, and then a nice transition out, and that means you're able to get on the throttle earlier. You're able to open your hands up faster to get going straight, and the cart will accelerate better on the way out. So
Mm-hmm.
GSum is just a fantastic tool that everybody uh, that has some time and is trying to fine tune that and find that last 3 or 4 tenths per lap. This is where you start to focus on the handling and what the driver inputs are doing to the handling. And this is just one driver's worth, right? Sometimes we can look at another driver, maybe your teammate, maybe you're sharing some data, and you am I at the peak, right? All we know is this driver is sitting there, and you can kind of see if you look across the peaks here, we got one big peak here where something happened here. Going into this turn down here, this right hander, all of a sudden this thing sees 2.3 G's on the G sum. Everywhere else it's 1.8. There's got to be a reason for that, right? So there,
Right.
are you going to go out there and say when you get back in and you start looking at your data, well, obviously my cart will do 2.31 Gs. I need to step it up in the rest of these corners. That's not always true. That particular corner
True.
may be banked. It may be, the rest of them may be flat, and that one might have a little bit of camber to it. There's reasons why. So these are not distinct numbers that you're looking for, but even more trends.
Well, like for this track, I know since it's PGP,
Mm.
that final corner is banked. It's a bowl that you go into. So you dip down and then you come back up where the track is negative cambered coming up there. So that would make sense that you'd have more, grip potential in that one corner because it does have that large, distinct dip.
Yeah, and which then is taking your cart, and you're getting, instead of a longitudinal and a lateral G's, you actually get even more G's in the Z axis, the up and down axis, right?
Hmm.
And which then plants, of course, the cart into the ground, and it's like having huge wings on your, on your cart all of a sudden, right? And it's just shoving you into into the asphalt, which gives you more grip. So
Right.
a deep bowl corner or a cambered corner like that, that's
Hmm.
why you're seeing that. So that's not going to happen in the rest of them. But if you look at the rest of them, look at it. It's one point. This one here is 1.6 on this particular lap for this driver. It's a little bit less entering that corner. Is
Hmm.
that the track? Is it the driver? We could look at some other laps and do some things, but and then he's very consistent on the next 4 or 5 of them, right? It's 1.8, 1.8, one just a touch over 1.8 on a spike, 1.8, 1.8, and then these last two again, that left-hander and then the long right-hander. He's at the 1.65, 1.7 range, 1.60, and maybe they're not as banked as much. So things you can do to look at them, right? So but now if you're looking at that and you go, well, by having a teammate, it's always great to open up another person's data and lay it right on top of it. And say, especially on the GSum, it's kind of an interesting thing because there's not just karting, it's not just tracks, it's driver inputs affect the GSum as much as other things do as well. So let's open up another test and take a look at another driver right on top of it. So we'll open up this driver that was out at the exact same time, running on the same track. And so when we open up the GSum and we have two different drivers, and I have David, the new driver we just added, is all of his traces are blue using the per lap color function up here, and we've got Mark still in red now. And now if we just look at the GSum for both drivers, what should jump out at you right off the bat is the blue traces are generally higher, across the board. On every corner, the GSum traces are just a little bit higher all the way across the board. So there's two things. There's many, but two that would jump out at me. Either the cart is set up better, has better tires, fresh tires, and the other driver had old tires. It's in the same heat race, but maybe somebody was running older tires, or the driver isn't capable or is not getting to the maximum of what the
Hmm.
cart is really after, right? So um, right away I would look at this and I'd say, okay, in this case the red driver is Mark. We If I was sitting there working with these two drivers, I said, okay, Mark, where are we at? What is happening? Is the cart not giving it to you? Are you not taking it? Why are we down a little bit here? Is it set up? Is it a cart that just
Hmm.
doesn't handle as well? What is it, right? So this is pretty clear that the driver is not running at a performance envelope that is in the red cart is not running at nearly the
Hmm.
performance envelope
Hmm.
of what the blue cart is doing. So something to look at. And then you can look at individual corners and start to understand, you see the shapes, right, that start to come out. And if you look at, we can go back and look at that same corner we were looking at a moment ago. Remember the red one had the little problem where he hits the brakes and released the brakes and then got
Right.
back after it. And look at the shape of the blue driver now. And while the longitudinal, he is off the brakes. He did hit the brakes one more time on the blue one, but he released the steering enough where the friction circle actually looks a lot smoother and
Hmm.
nicer. So it not only is it higher, but yeah, there is a dip here, a little bit of a dip here right at the
Hmm.
tip top, but which could be cleaned up, but it's substantially better than our first example.
Right.
That's why I wanted to bring this one up
Right.
and give you an idea of a little bit better look and feel to it. So pretty interesting.
But it is a good example of, not only comparing two drivers, but also showing that on the blue driver, there is still room for improvement. So you don't just automatically just say, oh, as a blue driver, it's higher, so it's just better, and we can just move on.
Never, ever, ever, right?
Right.
You can be the best in the entire group, and there's always room for improvement. It's motorsports, it's kart racing,
Hmm.
right? You can always do better. So, and the data is finding these things for you. If you know, and now that we've you know, talked a little bit about the blue driver, this one here, right? There's a big drop in that one, right? And there's a big drop in that one. Those are areas that and in the red one that's not. So okay, well, you know, that's not just a function of how the track is laid out or how you normally should drive that corner. I would dig into that and figure out, okay, you know, David, in this case, let's sit down and talk about what you're doing here, right, and why that's happening, right? You know, another good example of that is up in this corner. You can see that the you know, the blue driver came up there and threw some speed at it up here. And but yet right here, there's a, I'm going to zoom in on that little section. I'm going to pull this over just so we're looking at one little section. Just another good example of it is the cart is getting more G-forces from the GSum channel on the blue one and getting more here on the exit as well. But look at the big dip there, right? And so we have to ask ourselves, well, why did that happen? And the driver in the blue one, you know, faster into the preceding straightaway, was way faster, you know, under the brake or right at the apex of that corner. But then he had to you had to hit the brakes again, very, very hard, right here in the middle, right? Yeah, and the reason why, if we look at the GPS map, kind of helps us give a little bit of a clue. Kind of what happened is very wide on the exit of this one. Tried to come across here, and remember, it was fairly fast here in this spot right here, over here in the GPS map, but he's way to the inside and still has to rotate a lot in order to come off the corner. Well, when he noticed that as a driver as well, and when he needed to slow down to get the cart to rotate, and you can see he really applied the brakes right here, right there. And when he did that, the cart, you know, he had to throw a lot more steering at it as well, and it just slowed down the cart. The middle of the apex, the red one has quite a bit of more speed here, and comes off the corner a little bit better. The blue one has more horsepower, so it actually overcomes it. But boy, you can see on that blue corner why this GSum looked the way it did. You kind of dig back into it, right? So just another example of the GSum channel and looking at it in different spots and how it's not just the peak, but rather the longest sustainable values that the driver is reaching, and then are those sustainable values being hit and held and doing a nice job, right? And keeping the friction between the tires and the track at a nice constant level, so you don't have that all of a sudden you just whip the wheel that little bit too much and all of a sudden the cart either flies off or gets loose or starts to understeer and things like that. So GSum, it's a little bit of work to set it up the very first time. We can we'll talk more about math channels in future videos. We'll get a little bit deeper into them, but once you set it up, you can tell it to be always applied to every test I open. And so this channel is just another channel that's sitting there waiting for you in Race Studio 2 when you look at your data.
So that's the end of this AIM Learn Fast video. We've been taking comments from throughout social media and trying to come up with new topics that are most useful, so feel free to leave a comment below or get a hold of us on Facebook or on Twitter and just let us know any questions you have or any things that you like about these videos. We try to put up new videos every Tuesday, so just stay tuned to our channel and come back for more videos.